And that can be a powerful thing if done right.
Well said. Continue on. Valerie, would you like to?
Yes, I'm Valerie Baker. Pastor McCoy Church for the last almost 24 years.
Well, you're blessed,
Yes, I am.
as is he.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
One, I'm a disabled combat veteran,
Yes, ma'am.
retired nurse. I'm a senior. One of the things that I also have participated in the last few years is working polls. And what has bothered me most since all of this ruckus is going on is my concern about the ballot box.
Right.
Last year, because of fear of the mail system, I drove down to the actual location, supervisor's location building,
Mm-hmm.
and I dropped my ballot into the box. However, when you mention now every year, I'm going to have to call up and request for my ballot to come to my house. In past time, you know, I was on the books, and I looked for that ballot to come into the, my mailbox, and I would just mail it back to the polling place. Last year was a different circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
But if that opportunity is not given to me like it has been in the past, that bothers me.
Mm-hmm.
So, the only other place I can go is the community library. But now that they have these stipulations, I remember when President Obama first went into office, I stood in that line for I don't know how many hours. And now they're saying, can't get water from someone, can't get any food. So I am soon to be a real senior citizen, 65 years old, and I just can't see myself standing in that line.
Right.
I have physical impairments that is a real concern.
Well, if I may, Brian, first, thank you for your service to our country. I appreciate that, being a nurse especially. You know, you're one of the true heroes, and people in your profession have been the true heroes to get us through this pandemic that we all have suffered through. So thank you for that, dedicating your life to that purpose. You talk about the lines and having to wait in them and not being able to be served that.
Yeah.
God only knows why. Pardon?
It's a necessity.
Indeed.
It's an essential
Water is life.
element for us.
Yes, I know. And, you know, I mean, it just begs the question of what's in the heart of somebody who says, you can't get that, you know, a certain distance away from the ballot box if you're in line in hot Florida. It's beyond the pale. It's like, what kind of cool, cruel, cold, heartless existence thinks that's right? You know? I mean, like that's going to sway your vote because you're comfortable in line? And, you know, I remember the long lines. They were really long in 2008. And Obama's first election, right? President Obama's first election. And I know. And so many Floridians did as well. A lot of them seniors, Representative. And I remember I was in Tallahassee the week of the election. And, you know, people are voting early and they're waiting in these lines and they're trying to make a difference. And I get a call from a state senator, a guy named Dan Gelber. Dan's a brilliant guy. He's now the mayor of Miami Beach, pastor. And I talked to him today. And we were recalling about the lines you were in. And maybe some others of you probably. And he said, you know, Governor, I was a Republican at the time. And he said, are you seeing these lines on television in Tallahassee, particularly down here in Miami-Dade County? What's going on? And I said, I do. He goes, you got to do something. I said, what can I do? He said, well, why not sign an executive order expanding the hours that people can vote so that even when the sun goes down and it's a little bit cooler, they can still cast their ballot? I said, do I have that authority? I hadn't been governor before. He goes, I think so. Let's give it a shot. And I thought, well, that made sense. So I called in my general counsel, the lawyer for the governor's office. And I asked him, I said, do I have the authority to sign an executive order to expand hours of voting? Literally, you know, I'm like, you're the general counsel, you're supposed to know this stuff, right? And he goes, I don't think so. And I said, well, why is that? He said, because the statute that talks about executive orders says that you are allowed and permitted to sign them as governor if it addresses an emergency. I said, okay, I'm a lawyer too, so let's talk through this a little bit. I said, we're talking about a democracy and not being able to cast a ballot in a democracy, a free, open, and fair election. I said, that sounds like an emergency to me. Don't you think? Because if you think so, I do. I said, well, I do. So let's draft it up. I'll sign it, and we'll see what happens. And within a half hour, I signed the executive order, and all of a sudden, it was on television statewide and TV that the lines were going to be open longer for the convenience of the voter to be able to cast their ballot. And guess who won? I'm the Republican governor, and I signed that executive order, and Barack Obama gets elected president of the United States, largely because he carried Florida. Why'd I do it? Because when I got elected governor in 2006, I told my fellow Republicans, I didn't get elected governor of the Republicans of Florida. I got elected governor of the people of Florida. And I got to do what's right for all of them. You know, this isn't right versus left to me, this stuff. This is right versus wrong. And it's wrong to suppress the vote, to have them suffer in line, to not be able to get water. That stuff's just dead wrong. Even Republicans know that. But you know, they say what? Absolute power corrupts absolutely? As we talked about earlier, Representative, they got the House, they got the state Senate, and they got the governor's office.
And the court.
And they've had it too long. And the
Supreme
courts.
Court, yeah, sure.
You got it.
Mhm.
So we have our challenges. But hope springs eternal. You know, the next election is not that far away. And if we vote, we win. So thank you, Valerie, very much, for waiting in the line and making the difference you did then.
I tell you, it's refreshing to hear an act of political courage these days, you know? It's a great story.
Mom and Dad were good at this.
Right. Would you like to introduce yourself, and if you don't mind, introduce or explain what your group is, Equal Ground? Yeah.
So my name is Jasmine Burton Clark. I am the founder and consulting director of Equal Ground Education Fund is V3 and Equal Ground Action Fund is C4. We, like Alianza, are in the process of making some decisions around our endorsement process and have not ultimately come to a place where we are planning to do that, but we certainly plan to echo the sentiments and values of any candidate that holds the values of our organization. We primarily focus on the voting rights of Black folks in the state of Florida. We are situated along the Aqua Corridor, headquartered here in Orlando, but due to our work in the social affairs program, we worked a lot in rural communities, focusing on voter registration, voter turnout, voter education.
Right.
We know that there is an information gap as well as a Black political leadership gap in the state. And so we are, in addition to educating folks, also focusing on training up new political leaders to work alongside the ranks of Representative McCurdy in this state. A few things I want to bring up as it relates to SB 90. Not only did we oppose it in this past legislative session, we worked pretty actively with our Faith Alliance to have conversations with Senator Baxley, the author of the bill. We talked directly to him about his intentions, and it was clear that he was being spoon-fed legislation like it was being fed to legislatures across the rest of the nation. And so it became quickly clear that this was an attack on Black and brown voters like what we had never seen before in preparation for elections coming up. But not only in 2022, we have elections right here in Orlando this year. In your home community, there's going to be an election. There are municipal elections that people are now going to have to vote under the current laws until it goes through all of the hoops of litigation. The other thing that I would talk about is my concern for the voter ID requirement that is now required to request a vote by mail ballot, similar to that of signing up for a voter registration form. It was not required before. who don't have access to IDs, now making it a hurdle. The other concern is we are a third-party organization. Our work, again, is primarily centered around voter registration collection. And to have to tell a voter in their neighborhood that we may not be responsible enough to turn in your voter registration form in the time frame that is required cheapens our organization's brand, diminishes us as best messengers in our community, and really hurts our community when we are trying to be a trusted conduit between them and government that they don't actually trust in the election process. Finally, I'll say that we are going to unfortunately spend more time managing misinformation than mobilizing voters in this upcoming election, due to the fact that election officials aren't aware of the job that they are going to have to take on in this election, and we're going to have to sort of help manage the information that they're going to share with voters, as well as making sure that voters are prepared. One thing that I think is in your current capacity as the congressman is passing the John Lewis Voting Rights Act that's currently sitting on the desk right now that was there under the Trump administration. I'm curious if you could talk or speak a little bit more to that for us about where it sits and how that could impact us in the state, given the SB 90 bill that was just passed.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate that, Jasmine, and thank you for the hard work that you're doing. The Voting Rights Act, I think, has a great opportunity to become law. The president obviously supports the act, but we're on a two-track plan here too, for the People Act as well, and both are important to have, particularly because states like Florida, Texas, Georgia are doing the kind of mischief that they're doing to make it more difficult to exercise the right to vote. These two federal acts give us an opportunity to right that wrong, maybe even more quickly than we could electorally. So it's very important. I don't know how closely you've been following it, but to the For the People Act, it's caught up on what they call the filibuster rule, and whether the Senate only needs 50 votes, 51 to pass a bill instead of 60, and that kind of inside baseball stuff that's going on with it. My view is it should just be 50 plus 1 that passes a bill out of 100 people, simple majority. I am hopeful that some of the senators that are objecting, that are on our side of the aisle, will come around to the view that, you know, there are times when you have to not have that rule, that it takes 60 votes, and it should be a simple majority when it's something as fundamental and as important as the right to vote. Simple majority ought to rule the day. It sure does in presidential elections and elections for state representatives. Why not here? And I still hold out hope that can occur and that can happen.
And Kiana, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm
Hi.
Kiana Vasquez. I am a paralegal. I work at a criminal defense firm. I am an American. I am a Puerto Rican. I'm a woman. I'm a voter. I'm here as a person of color as well. And my concern is based on everything that I've read and know just living in this country all my life. It seems that they're deliberately restricting accessibility to people of color, and that's my concern. So my question would be, what are you going to do to prevent the silencing of the voices of people of color in the state of Florida?
What we're doing right now. See
This
this
is a great
thing?
start.
Yeah, I think so. But the first thing is to stand up, speak out, talk about these things, give it a voice. Because if people don't hear about it, I mean, look how the governor signed the bill, right? So he goes to some auditorium in South Florida, doesn't invite the media, but for one, Fox News, of course. So naturally, so he has this limited audience that speaks to his base and his base alone, and really can't talk about the kind of restrictions they put in the law that we've been talking about today, and how unfair and unjust those restrictions are. So we have a duty to educate the electorate, to speak up, to speak out, make sure they're aware of how horrible this thing is that they've done, and to intentionally suppress the vote of people of color.
And alienating working class people as well.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate the fact that you mentioned extending the hours for a person like myself that's employed full-time. But for those extended hours, I would never have been able to vote.
No question about it.
Absolutely.
We had at our last forum in Tampa a representative of SEIU, the union, talking about working folks and how much more difficult it is to vote within, you know, if your voting is like over at 5 o'clock or 7 and you can't extend it longer because maybe you had to work more? Please, go ahead.
I just wanted to add to what you were saying.
Yeah,
In the 30 years as a registered nurse, they went from an 8-hour shift
yes,
to a 12-hour shift. For example, day shift, we would have to report at 6:45,
hmm.
and we would get off at 7:30 p.m.
Before and after the polls are closed.
Exactly. Not only that, when we fill up a nursing staff, of course they'll give you a little, incentive, that's the money in your check.
Right.
Then you do an extra 4 hours. So now I've worked 12 hours, 16 hours.
Wow.
It doesn't happen every day, but in anybody's profession, when you are short and you have that ability to care for patients,
Mhm.
you're concerned with your desire, your passion is, I have to care for these patients.
Right.
Because this one did not come. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
timing is so important wherein the time would have to be extended for certain professions. And that would, I say, benefit everyone.
You know what I don't understand? To your point, why don't we make Election Day a holiday? Right?
It's a holiday where I come from.
Yeah, where's that? Where's that?
Puerto Rico.
Yeah, yeah, muy bien. That just makes such perfect sense, does it not? Shouldn't it be a day that we celebrate? You know, maybe have a party after you vote, encourage your friends and your family and your neighbors to get out. It's much like Souls to the Polls kind of thing. Maybe even do it on a Saturday. I think Louisiana actually does that. They do it on a weekend. So, much less people are having to work than you would have during a weekday.
But remember, healthcare workers and, first responders, we're 24/7, 365 days. So even if you were to determine, say, a weekend, a Saturday or Sunday,
Right.
some people are still gonna have to, vote on a different day.
Right, right. Well, and that's why early voting's been so
Or through a
important.
different platform, like the mail.
Yeah, so it's not just one day, but several days that you have the opportunity.
They decreased the number of early voting days too.
Yeah, sure, why not? Why make it hard? Make it easy.
Because they can. That was the theme from the past session,
Yeah,
was because they can. I would love if I would make voting a holiday, but it probably won't get a hearing in this legislature right now, so.
yeah,
I guess the good thing that we see is the leaders in the majority right now, they don't really think for themselves, but they seem to take their direction from the governor. So if you're fortunate, maybe perhaps they'll take your direction. But I think we'll have more leverage as to what bills we can get heard that we want to see as priorities for us too. If they just don't have that super majority. Because there are a lot of criminal justice, there are a lot of things that's wrapped up in the super majority. We can't get anything done, we can't get anything heard, we can't bring any money home, we can't get any projects funded because they control everything. And they told us blatantly on the House floor, in their response in 3 words, because they can. And that's dangerous when you have people that, make decisions for 2.1 billion people, soon to be or almost second largest state in the country, so.
right. Can I paint a picture for you?
Sure.
And we alluded to it earlier. So let's imagine we're successful. And so we get back up there in, December of 22. And then we get into the new year and another session, right? And you have a bill you want to have heard. And you call your buddy Charlie over at the mansion and say, hey, man,
That sounds so good.
they won't. We'll see. God willing. And us working. But let's imagine that future, okay? And you say, look, I got a bill that's really important. It's about funding for a community center in my district. And I want it to be heard. And this, committee chairperson won't schedule it. And I'll say, well, who is that? And you'll tell me. Do you know their number? And we'll write it down. And then I'll say, well, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, whatever it is hypothetical. I said, let me see if I can get a hold of that person, and I'll get back to you, okay? And I'll pick up the phone, and I'll just call. And odds are they'll probably take the call, and not for any love of me, but maybe because of that thing, who knows? So I'll have a conversation. Say the representative from Orlando has a bill he'd like to be heard, and I'm hearing that you don't want to schedule it or even calendar it, you know, to have a hearing. I also hear you have a bill that you're putting up this session that's important to you. And, you know, that should be heard and get a fair vote. And so should Representative McCurdy's bill get a fair vote,
Sounds like equal ground.
you know? And I don't know what's going to happen later on in the session, but if your bill passes and his doesn't even get heard, I got some ink in this pen. And you probably don't even have to go there, you know what I'm saying? But that's a future we can embrace until the time that we get the majority in the House and the majority in the state Senate, and keep moving forward. This is the longest journey starts with one step. And if we can get this one step, a whole lot of things open up for a
Congressman,
very bright future.
Congressman, this journey that you're taking on is very interesting to me, and I'm sure it's interesting to everybody else in the room. You and I haven't talked before, but I imagine that you made your decision of changing from being Republican to being independent and now Democrat. Was a process that involved a lot of thought in a state like Florida, right, which is such a 50-50 balanced state. I want to think that you saw the tea leaves where they were moving. You saw the direction that the Republican Party. I want to think that, assuming right that's what brought you to
It's
make
for
these
Doug.
concessions. Sadly, we've seen what's happened.
Yeah.
I wish more Republicans had analyzed what was going on inside their party, like you did. So I think that your position, having been a Republican, is a very interesting situation in this race. You spoke about, bringing back to the subject of today, voting rights. We've talked about all of these problems that we're facing, and they really become uphill because not just Republicans, but also Democrats maybe have not acted as strongly as we needed to at certain times, and now we're in a really bad situation. Want to thank you also for bringing us all together. I didn't know who was going to be in the room today. I'm so happy to see Jasmine, Pastor Marcus, welcome. We haven't met. Representative McCurdy, thank you for joining us also. I want to make sure to all of you that this is not the last time that we meet, right? Because we come here and you brought us all together today, but there needs to be more conversation between our communities, and that is a fact. And we in Alianza are more than willing and more than committed to have that conversation and join arms. It's gonna take that kind of collaboration. It's gonna take that kind of brotherhood and sisterhood in order for us to be able to get a Democratic governor in Tallahassee next year. That's a must. I don't see it as, wow, everybody's saying we can't do it. Well, I'm seeing in this room that we can do it. I want to say that. And I want to also point to something that affects us in the Latino community a lot, regardless of what our immigration status is. And it's this thing that Rick Scott started doing when he was governor, of purging the list because of supposedly the list being full of undocumented people. There was never any proof, just the same way they don't have any proof that anybody was voting illegally. They don't have any proof that there was illegal people in the rolls, but they purged it anyway, and they created that media hype so that every Latino that goes to the vote is suspect. Is he legal or is he illegal, regardless of whether he has a license or not, right? So they're criminalizing our vote, basically, making us suspects before we go to place our vote. So this is very, very important. It is about fairness. It is about decency and respect. And the only way to really stop it right now is for us to speak out and call them out. And I know that you have a unique position right now, regardless of what happens in the primaries, to really speak out and call them out on this, because we've seen this country go through this before. There's people who believe voting is a privilege. is for a few. And those are the people who said that black people couldn't vote, right, in the beginning, right?
And
Those are the people that said that women couldn't vote in the beginning, right? But we fixed that, right? We fixed that. We got women to vote, and we got black people to vote. Now we gotta protect that, like it's our only thing. Otherwise, we're gonna be in a situation where we won't be able to change it. No matter how much we vote, we won't be able to change things because the vote will be worthless. So we need to fight for that vote. This is the moment. Thank you for bringing us all together.
It's my pleasure. Thank you. And just a couple of comments, if I
I
might.
think we're about out of time, so yeah, we'll have
Are we?
remarks.
You're quite right. As always, I'll be brief. So,
Appreciate that, thank you.
not at all. So Republican to Democrat. The short version of that story is Barack Obama. So in 2009, I'm the Republican governor, he's the Democrat, new Democratic president. We're in the Great Recession, just fell into it. He calls and invites me to be with him in Fort Myers in February of '09 for a rally to get his stimulus plan passed. And I accept, I go. Because I was there, he said, would you introduce me? And I said, sure. So I go up to the podium, introduce him. Please give a warm Florida welcome for President Barack Obama. He comes up to the podium, like the one behind you, shakes my hand, and then he hugs me. And I hugged him back. And somebody took a picture of him. And the backlash from my former party was, like you can't believe. And I don't think it was just because he was a Democratic president.
Appreciate your candor, sir.
Well, I was on, what's the guy, Colbert has a show?
Stephen Colbert, yeah.
I was on his show because I wrote a book about it called The Party's Over. Theirs, not ours. And he asked me, he said, well, why did you hug him and why did you not stay with the Republican Party? And I said, I don't think it was just because I hugged the Democratic president. And he goes, well, what are you saying? Are you putting down the race card? I said, well, he was black, and he is. And he said, you just threw down the race card. I said, no, that's not what I did. I just told you the truth. And he was like, okay, let's go to commercial. I mean, but that's why that happened. I was brought up by my mom and dad, I referred earlier, and raised me and my three sisters to treat people with respect and common decency and humanity. And I saw that and I thought, that's not kosher. You know, that can't happen and shouldn't happen. And it is possible to win. And you hear it all the time, oh, you can't win. Well, there was a guy named Wayne Gretzky who played hockey, and he said, you'll never make the shot you don't take. And one of my colleagues in Washington, what's his name, Chief? John from California, big guy.
Grimaldi, something like that?
It's
Tall?
like that.
Okay.
Anyway, he says to me a couple weeks ago, he goes, I like how you're positioned in this race. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, you're on the ballot. If you're not on the ballot, you can't win. You're on the ballot, and the people of Florida know you. So you're in the game, man. Let's go get it. So we can win. I don't
Yes,
doubt that at all.
I agree.
And
We
I
have
can't
to.
thank you all for your
We
time.
have to.
Enough. You're very important people.
Myself and Representative were the same age, I won't tell
Uh-huh.
you. But I can't remember a time, 'cause you said that we know you here in Florida. I can't remember a time in my life where I didn't know who Charlie Crist was, all the way back from when you were education commissioner. So.
You have a good memory.
We're familiar with you, and to a certain extent, I think we trust you.
You
know?
can.
So,
We
yeah.
grew up with you.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
We grew up with each other,
yeah.
and we just have a duty to keep going. Never give up. Never give up. Never give up. No
Thank you for
matter
letting us
the
know that.
overwhelming apparent might of the enemy, never give up.
There's more of us than there are of them. We just
That's right. We vote, we
gotta
win.
get our people
Simple.
there.
Yeah.
Thank
Bless
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Council.
very much so.
Thank
Yeah.
you all.
Congressman,
Thank you. Yes.
in all 67 counties you go to, not one SOE supervisor supported it.
Not one.
Remember
Isn't that
that?
amazing? That's a great point. It's good to see you in
And there's
person.
no money that they put aside for these drop boxes.
Right.
Or the $25,000 daily fines that SOE officers
Yeah,
pay for. So
right. Do you have one of your cards with you today? Bless you. It's great seeing you. I enjoyed our talk.
I got to. I can't let it.
Very much. Appreciate it. Yeah, can we get a picture together? Do you mind?
Gotta come back and-
That's a cool song. And how do you do that?
Either way.
You're good. Why don't we just you and I together, and then the three of us?
Okay.
All right?
Perfect.
Excellent.
Let me meet you.
Yeah.
Introduce you.
Yeah. Okay.
Monish.
King.